So I guess Ferrari's rear suspension is in jeopardy. I don't know. All I know is they're saying that they're gonna bring an upgrade for their rear wing, and they're not even gonna. No, their rear suspension, not rear wing. They're gonna bring an upgrade for their rear suspension by Silverstone, which is round 12. Maybe at best by Spain, which is round 9. I don't even know why they're continuing to hold on to this season. This season is over. It's an absolute disaster. And once again, follow me. What did I say when Lewis Hamilton signed to Ferrari?
You said so. It was an ill-advised decition.
Graveyard.
Yeah, and it's proven to be so right now with all the.
We heard it on Formula One Fanatics. I don't know if everybody talked about it. Nobody mentioned anything when Ferrari changed their front suspension, thereby changing their whole concept. They had a car which was working last year, which was the second fastest car in Formula One. And it came down to the last day of winning the Constructors. Then they bring in Hamilton and they say they're going to change their concept. Changing your concept in the last year of regulations in which other teams have fully evolved and reached the culmination of ground effects rules. Stupid. That's the only word I have for it. Change their front suspension. By Australia, I think by Chinese Grand Prix, it became clear that the window of their performance where they drive well is at a rate at which causes plank degradation for them. So in other words, their window for great performance is too low because when it's that level, they get suspended. Then they wait. Last week they said that they weren't going to bring upgrades to Miami because they wanted to bring it to Imola because in Imola they said in Miami you have sprint races, so you can't test to see if your upgrades work. Now they're pushing it. It just seems like they're making excuses. The team has lost and they're trying to do media control so that the passionate Italians don't throw vino in their face. What do you think, Afolabi?
Yes, I agree with you. The Italian fans are very unforgiving. And
I have wine here. I'm going to throw vino in their face and spit them out.
And this rear suspension upgrade is critically needed because their suspension is really messing up. It's affecting the handling.
Right in front of you. I don't think they know why, and I don't think I know why, but I think it has to do with changing your front suspension without thinking about all the complications that will come with that. Exactly. Because these cars are one unit. If you do one thing to one spot, it changes the whole thing. Sorry, continue with your thought.
Exactly. And what you said is actually very right because the suspension now is affecting even as much as the tire preservation, as well as the aerodynamic efficiency, the ground effects, the downforce. Everything has been thrown into chaos just because.
It just means the car is slow. It doesn't even have bad tire ding. It's just slow.
The car is just basically slow. And the only thing they have to show for this season is one podium for Leclerc. I think that was in Saudi Arabia. Nothing else. Yeah. It's been a miserable track. Yes, and it's been a very miserable season. And like you rightly mentioned, why go and radically do a design departure from the SF24 that served you so well last year? And I feel the design decision was based on the fact that they brought Hamilton in. And now
they wanted to make it more.
Yeah, they've upset the apple cart now, and it's affecting the car. Now you want to change the suspension in the middle of the season. This is going to be very tough. Now they said they want to start the wind tunnel test next week. How do they intend to roll out that upgrade? By the time other teams have covered and overtaken them and gained points on them, it really doesn't make any sense. Like you said, the season is just as good as over for Ferrari.
And then they're going to make next season, so it's going to continue. They're going to be bad next season because they're not putting things in. One last thing, how ironic. They kicked Sainz out, and now Williams is fighting and is going to be better than them this year. And I was crying for Sainz that, Sainz isn't on a top 5 team. I should have been celebrating for him. They did him a favor. They did Sainz a favor.
They actually did.
What are your thoughts, Lorato?
Yeah, I'm actually thinking just that when we see the regression at Ferrari, and like you rightly both said, this idea of radical quick changes, we've seen to not work during the ground effect era. I think even like changing a small slot in the floor changes the whole aerodynamic performance of your car, and you need to be very methodical and be very heavy on your testing before you start implementing any changes to your vehicle.
Like Williams and McLaren,
So
be careful.
it was very.
Sorry,
Yeah. I think the one thing, that I think would have possibly been good to do was simply to change the chassis so that it accommodates a more rearward seat, and things like that, so that the driver is a little bit more comfortable in the car. But this whole idea of doing a 90% sort of like change in the car, as Fred Vasseur had said it pre-season, was always seen as a gamble, and it doesn't look like it's working out in their favor. And also, I mean, I'm not sure when the technical team is busy trying to remedy all the issues that they could try to remedy for 2025, how they're going to then deal with the new regulations. Are they still going to be scrambling in the beginning of the year to come up with a new concept? When I think they would be better served serving their time now, just moving towards the 2026 car and making sure that they get in some proper testing towards sort of like having a better season in the next year. Because I mean, their problems are that they're able to convert what it is that they have in terms of engine power into pace on the car, and that has to do with, of course, things like the aerodynamics, the car height, and as well as, which I think then are affected by problems with how then suspensions handle different tracks and things like that. And yeah, I'm not really sure exactly how a new suspension is going to change their fortune. But I think we have seen, I think even over the last two seasons, that Ferrari does have kind of like a capability to improve the car very much in the late stages of the season. But
they're 150 points behind.
For sure, which is not a great thing. But I'm saying that they do have that capability. But it's kind of counterintuitive that once they had made such great progress in 2024, they decided to sort of start over.
I don't know why they did. I'm going to say it again. It's clear Ferrari's not an engineering team. Nothing they're doing makes sense, and they don't even understand. They said that the correlations between their wind tunnel, that means their wind tunnel is no good, because their wind tunnel is only looking at aerodynamics. Nowadays, your wind tunnels need to be complex. You need to change even the surface within the wind tunnel, the whatever they call it. You have to make it model change the surfaces of the other tracks, and you have to take into account things like suspension and curbing. I don't think they spent money on that. I think they were just operating off a profit, which is why, again, before McLaren does any changes, they do multiple variables and they make slight changes, because we know that a wind tunnel can't take into account, for example, McLaren is now using chemical changes. They're using a phase changing material. That's not even aerodynamics anymore, because they know that once you start making aerodynamic changes and changes in suspensions, you're going into variables you can't control. Which is why it's interesting that this tire thing with McLaren is not about aerodynamics or mechanical. It's about putting a material which can save energy and it can keep in energy without increasing temperature and then release the energy later. So McLaren is making changes which are chemical, because you can predict chemical changes don't affect the aerodynamics. But Ferrari jumped into territory which I don't think they understand, to be honest with you. And they don't have they don't have the research money that Mercedes engine teams have. What were you going to say?
Yeah, and things like material changes have other aspects to them. I think even in terms of something like weight, you could find that these phase changing materials are a little bit less lighter, less heavier on the car and
Yeah.
basically less heavier on the wheels and on the tires, which is what has been giving McLaren a little bit of an extra advantage. But I think I remember saying before last year, even when we were reviewing the 24 season, that what McLaren had as an advantage was a great platform on which to build.
A balanced platform
to build ahead, including the fact that they had sort of like two solid drivers. So they built forward, as opposed to the situation that Ferrari finds themselves in, with a new driver who's acclimatizing to the brake systems, who's acclimatizing to the engine systems, after having driven for Mercedes for the previous 8 years or however long it has been that Lewis was at Mercedes. So he's gotten used to using all those other tools and technologies, and now he's using new technologies in a new era that we've seen him struggle in since 2022. As soon as the ground effect era came in, he struggled to sort of adapt, and now he's adapting to both the new regulations. Well, no longer new regulations anymore, because they're in their final year. But adapting then to ground effects, different car. And now with an engineering team that is also sort of grappling with the new dynamic of a new car and a new driver altogether.
I don't get it.
That really destabilized whatever platform that they had in 2024.
And which is next year, because even next year when they switch to a new thing, it's still going to be a transition, which means McLaren will still be ahead, because it's going to be a transition from this. It's not going to just be all of a sudden unknown changes. They're going to transition, and they're going to still keep ground effects next year and slowly phase it out. So they're in trouble for next year, and it's going to lead up to, it's going to be for the foreseeable future until they decide to just say, okay, we're going to lose now. Let's build a new concept. What are you going to say?
Yeah. So I think there needs to be an adoption of like slow evolution in terms of their car building methods, so that they're able to sort of create solutions for whatever problems that they might come across as they do testing, because we don't know. I mean, they're saying a new rear suspension, and we don't know what problems that's going to bring.
But that's going to bring other problems again.
Yeah. So possibly that's another 4 weeks of them adapting to that, and trying to get to grips with that. But like I said, I mean, I think they do have a knack of making things work late in the season, and they are going to then be messing up mingling with the top three teams.
They'll be lucky. Ferrari will be lucky if they come fifth, if they come fourth. They could very well.
Yeah. But I'm just saying in terms of the drama towards the end of the season, in terms of who's going to win and all those things, I think they might still have a chance to play.
I don't think so. You know why? They're 150 points behind now. Even if they catch up, let's say they become competitive with McLaren. If they become competitive with McLaren, it means they'll split at best 50% of the points, but they're already 150 points behind.
No. So they still a lot of points behind, but I'm saying in terms of the individual championships.
Oh, but even the individual championship, you've got Russell.
Yeah. Sure.
Verstappen. Yeah. So Leclerc.
You've got Max. You've got Lando.
Yeah.
But
McLaren,
but I'm saying in terms of taking points away from them in order for them to make.
But I mean they're just playing spoilers.
More convincingly.
Their guys won't win.
But I'm not saying it's anything that's going to be highly consequential in terms of Ferrari making any gains. But I'm saying in terms of disrupting the progress of the other guys.
Maybe,
When they should they improve, and when they do improve, we could see that kind of drama come into play. But I don't think it's going to be very consequential in terms of.
To be honest with you, I don't think it can happen because if they're doing chaos and they're just making changes, what even leads us to believe that those changes will lead to improvements at the end of the year? You get what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. But
I think the difference is they had Sainz. Sainz was helping to push that team in the right direction. They should have gotten rid of if they weren't going to get rid of Hamilton, they should have gotten rid of Leclerc. You can't have Hamilton and Leclerc on the same team because neither of them gives feedback to the team. Yeah, but anyway, what do you think of Falabi?
Yeah, you guys have said it all. The fact that they are having correlation problems, the data from the wind tunnel test does not, is not consistent with performance outcomes. Now, that's going to delay the rolling out of that new suspension. And then again, you ask yourself whether it's going to work at all. Although they said the suspension over the last couple of races have been very wobbly, and it has affected their stability. So they feel they need to make the suspension stiffer. I don't know how that will help them. But you are looking at a team that says by Barcelona and Imola, they would have the upgrades ready. But with the kind of wind tunnel testing that can be trusted, I don't know whether it's the software or the sophistication of their wind tunnel computer that, that can take the upgrades and the design of the car holistically and takes it in part, but they can't trust the data from their wind tunnel test. So we probably may not see this upgrade until.
Here's the thing. To me, the most important part in an F1 car is the floor. You can't talk about front suspension or back suspension because those are two discrete, separate things. The floor unifies the whole concept. So they have to figure out what's the ideal ride height based on what their front suspension philosophy is. They had one last year. They should have continued learning from it. But by changing that, so now you're changing the front and the back, thinking that those things are connected. But what connects them is the floor. You see what I'm saying?
There's a floor.
So they don't have a platform like Lorato says. Red Bull uses platform, but things went wrong with Red Bull. I don't know what happened because Verstappen was so good, they didn't realize that they were getting slower. But even if you look at Red Bull, they focus on the floor over and over again. The Ferrari they brought a floor upgrade a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yeah, I think it was in Bahrain.
But it didn't work. But the reason it didn't work is because they just said, let's change the floor. But you have to make the floor the central thing. That's the whole thing about aerodynamics is the floor and the top of the car and the shape of the car. They're not dealing with the fundamentals anymore. They're getting too esoteric.
And that's why I feel their approach is more scattergun than methodical. They seem to be trying trial and error kind of thing. Let's try this if it works and stuff like that. And they're already playing catch up.
Yeah, it may eventually work, but by the time it works, Leclerc is losing another season. And here's the question.
It'll be too late, yeah.
It'll be too late, exactly. The only thing, though, will be when the front flexi thing is finally taken off. Based on regulation, there can be some kind of gains vis-a-vis the other teams. But even with 150 points, how do you cover that? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but even when they take away the front wing, they still don't have a stable chassis. At least these guys have a stable platform, McLaren. And also, even when they take away the front wing, McLaren still has this tire trick.
McLaren has a lot in the bag in terms of even when you take away flexi wing.
Crazy, man.
So I don't think, and the fact that they've been winning a lot of the races. I think Max is the only person.
From McLaren taking away the front wing is Mercedes. McLaren needs to keep an eye on Mercedes because I have a feeling that Mercedes is going to be like Ferrari last year. Mercedes is going to score more points than McLaren during the second half of the year with Russell.
But I think Mercedes has also been benefiting from the flexi wing.
And George Russell can still win the Drivers' Championship. Yeah. But it just seems like Mercedes doesn't benefit from it as much as McLaren does, and it seems like Mercedes' front wing still has that issue, but they've been moderating it a little bit. But Mercedes and McLaren, the only difference right now between those two teams is actually the tire preservation. And if these teams figure out that thing, if they get that thing within 2 weeks, if they can get that thing, it's gonna negate McLaren's advantage. So all of F1 right now should be spending all their resources on figuring out that phase changing material. Yeah. All right. Last thoughts, Lorato, before we go. Let's keep it quick, like maybe 30 seconds, a minute, then we'll go to our follow-up.
Yeah, for sure. I think there is, again, this kind of like engineering race that is happening on the paddock, which is like off track, that always keeps the actual races interesting. And McLaren has seemingly been far ahead of the rest of kind of like the grid with regards to that, which is why we see what we've seen. And yeah, I mean, if the flexi wing changes are going to disadvantage McLaren, the one person who's there, or the two people who are there, is Russell and Max, who can actually take advantage of any losses that McLaren would have. But yeah, it would be interesting to see if the Ferrari engineers know what they're doing by changing the rear suspensions.
Yeah, maybe they've got it. Maybe, but they need to hurry up and get it in there.
Yeah. And if they can then start presenting problems for the top three teams, or even for the third spot in constructors or whatever.
Then also, if they bring in that rear suspension, they might do that as a picture to extending it to next year, and then continue with this concept. Because like I said, teams are going to continue with their concept now, since they're moving into unknown territory, which is why McLaren will still have an advantage next year. So maybe Ferrari is like, okay, we'll bring in this new rear suspension, and moving forward, even to 2026, this is our concept. That's the only thing that makes sense. What do you think, Afolabi?
Yeah, I quite agree with you, but I feel with or without the flexi wings thing, once we get to the later part of the year and we get to the tracks where temperature does not necessarily affect tire degradation, the difference between McLaren and other teams is going to narrow up. And it's going to the likes of Mercedes and Red Bull are going to begin to take race wins. So I feel it's because of the time of the year we're in. I think. Yeah,
to be honest, the only real thing that McLaren has now is that tire thing, but that's everything. Yeah, but it only helps. It only helps on real limited tracks, and it only helps when the weather is hot. So that's why you see Verstappen win now and then when it's cool weather and stuff. I still predict that McLaren's not going to win in Vegas and those places where the track is cold, or Silverstone.
Yeah, or Silverstone. Yeah.
All right. Okay, take us out, Ferrari. Nice show, guys. Yeah.
Okay, it's been another brilliant Formula One show, and we've been discussing Ferrari and the plan to stiffen up their rear suspension. And from Lerato and Mustafa, is bye for now.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Yes.